All right. We appreciate everybody coming out tonight. We're getting kicked off just a few minutes late. We got everybody in their seats here in the building. So we're going to go ahead and kick off this meeting. It's a public meeting for the Hatchie-Loosahatchie Mississippi River Ecosystem Restoration Study that we've been working on with our non-federal sponsor, the Lower Mississippi River Conservation Committee. First thing we're going to do tonight is turn it over to our project manager, Jason Allman, for a few welcoming remarks.
Hey, thanks. I'm Jason Allman, the project manager, and it's really good to have everybody out tonight. We're really proud to be at this point in the study and just a couple months away from the agency decision. So this is a good time for this meeting and to get your input. So as we move forward tonight, our district commander wasn't able to be with us, but he did record a video, so I'll play that for you now.
Welcome to the Hatchie-Loosahatchie Ecosystem Restoration Study public meeting. I'm Colonel Brian Sawser, 60th Commander of United States Army Corps of Engineers, Memphis District. I want to thank you all for joining us on this very important day as we relook this study in this part of the Mississippi River. Unfortunately, I will not be able to join you today as I'm called to Washington, D.C. Truly wish I could have joined you. That said, I'm very excited the team will share the study progress with you while continuing to work the study with the non-federal sponsor and our partner, the Lower Mississippi River Conservation Committee. Together, we have a great opportunity to find ways for navigation, flood risk management, and ecosystem restoration to coexist on the Lower Mississippi River. As one of the greatest water highways on Earth, the significance of the Mississippi River to our nation's economy simply cannot be overstated. The river supports a nearly $13 billion shipping industry, along with over 35,000 direct jobs. And most importantly, the river helps feed the world. As one of our nation's greatest natural resources and cultural treasures, the ecological health of the Mississippi River remains critical. Since signing the study's feasibility cost share agreement with the Lower Mississippi Conservation Committee in July of 2021, we've held many meetings with our partner and the public to identify Lower Mississippi River ecosystem restoration opportunities. As a team, we compile these opportunities into various alternatives while painstakingly analyzing them, ultimately coming up with a tentatively selected plan. The purpose of today's meeting is to present this proposed plan and seek your feedback. Again, thank you for joining us today and being a part of this effort to sustain and restore this vital waterway and natural resource. Please utilize the contact methods provided to share your comments with the team. Have a great day. Essayons.
Okay, then I'll turn it back over to Mike.
All right. Thanks, Jason. The next thing we have on our agenda, we're going to have a few remarks from our non-federal sponsor, the Lower Mississippi River Conservation Committee. So I want to welcome Jason Henniger. He's the current chair for the LMRCC.
Thank you, Mike. On behalf of the LMRCC Executive Committee, I would like to welcome everyone tonight to the public meeting on the draft report and draft environmental assessment on the Hatchie-Loosahatchie Mississippi River Ecosystem Restoration Study. The LMRCC is pleased to be the non-federal sponsor for this important study, and we welcome your input. I'd like to provide a bit of background about the LMRCC for those of you that may be unfamiliar with our organization. The LMRCC is a coalition of 12 state natural resource conservation and environmental quality agencies in Arkansas, Kentucky, Louisiana, Mississippi, Missouri, and Tennessee. The LMRCC is dedicated to conserving the natural resources of the Lower Mississippi River's floodplain, focusing on habitat restoration, long-term conservation planning, and scientific assessment of the river's health. The study that we're getting ready to talk about tonight covers roughly 39 miles of Mississippi River from the mouth of the Hatchie River to Loosahatchie Bar at Memphis. The reach lends itself to restoration opportunities from the main river channel all the way to the levee or bluff on the floodplain that would benefit both aquatic and terrestrial species. From rare species to popular game species, we have worked to develop a tentative selected plan, which you will hear all about tonight. The LMRCC is pleased with this plan as it addresses numerous habitats throughout this reach. However, we encourage your feedback and suggestions to give us the best possible product to move forward to construction in the next phase. The LMRCC and its partners are committed to bringing ecological improvements to the lower Mississippi River while not impacting other critical uses of the river, such as navigation and flood risk management. We look forward to working with all you and the U.S. Corps of Engineers in this new chapter of restoring America's greatest river. With that, I'll turn it back over to Mike.
All right, thanks, Jason. So just a little bit about the agenda for the rest of the evening. So I'm gonna give a quick study overview, the summary of our findings so far, and then we're gonna open it up for a public commenting session. The people in the audience we have a microphone available for you to stand up and provide some public comments if you would like. You were given a handout at the beginning of the meeting as well. If you'd prefer to provide written comments tonight, you can write them down on that comment card on the back of your handout and turn those in before you leave. We just ask that you put your name and email on there so we can follow up with you if we have additional questions or issues we need to talk through. For those on the virtual portion of the meeting, we do have the chat function open on the YouTube channel, so you can provide your comments through that. We just, again, recommend you putting your name and your email on there so we can follow up if we need to. If we can't answer something tonight, we'll make sure we find the appropriate people that will have an answer for you, and we'll get those comments addressed. So I'll go ahead and kick it off. My name's Mike Throne. I'm the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA coordinator for the study. This study is being conducted in partnership with the Lower Mississippi River Conservation Committee, our non-federal sponsor. I want to welcome everybody for being here and really encourage participation today. So any input we get from you will definitely be valuable to us moving forward in this study. A little bit about the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA. So that's the basic national charter for environmental protection. It requires federal agencies to prepare environmental impact statements or environmental assessments for most federal actions. It also requires that environmental information be made available to the public. And for this particular study, we've prepared an integrated feasibility report and draft environmental assessment for your review and comment. So again, we're holding this meeting to discuss the findings of the draft integrated feasibility report and draft environmental assessment for the Hatchie-Loosahatchie Mississippi River Ecosystem Restoration Study. We're soliciting comments on the plan we have proposed. The report was released on February 10th and is available on our project website. We'll be showing the link to this website on our closing slide, which we'll refer to back during the commenting portion of the meeting. The comment period for this draft environmental assessment is open through March 13th. So if you would rather not comment today, you may continue to do so through this date. So you heard from our non-federal sponsor. Again, they're the Lower Mississippi River Conservation Committee, the LMRCC. They've been working since 1994, dedicated to conservation in the Lower Mississippi River, and they work in cooperation with numerous federal, state, and non-governmental organizations for continual improvements to managing the river, recognizing its value as a multi-purpose river. They have a really fantastic website, which we are showing here on this slide. It really highlights all the conservation activities that they are involved with up and down the Lower Mississippi River, and I encourage you to check that out if you have time. So these are the member agencies and additional stakeholders we've been coordinating with throughout this study. I want to highlight those state agencies from Arkansas and Tennessee that are shown here, since those are the resource agencies that border this section of the river. So those, if we move forward into project construction, those are likely the cost share partners. So I wanted to highlight those wildlife and water quality agencies from those two states. In addition to those LMRCC member agencies, we have a variety of stakeholders from non-governmental organizations and other federal agencies and state agencies, the tribes that we've been coordinating with throughout the study, and we appreciate all the input that they've given us to this point. So for a little bit of background, so this study stems from a watershed type assessment that was done back in 2015, known as the Lower Mississippi River Resource Assessment, or the LMRRA. So what that watershed assessment did, it looked at the lower river, recognizing that flood risk management and navigation have been the main focal points of the lower Mississippi River up to this point. So it really wanted to look at what are the other needs out on the lower Mississippi River. What they found was 3 series of recommendations. One was related to the data gaps that are out there, a data science and communications program. It was a series of recommendations related to that. You'll see that shown in blue on the screen. There was a series of recommendations related to habitat restoration and management. That's what you're seeing shown in green. And then there was also a series of recommendations related to recreation. So this particular study is directly related to that habitat restoration management program number 1, where they were recommending 8 feasibility studies be conducted in various priority reaches along the river. So these priority reaches collectively make up about 290 river miles. That's 30% of the whole lower Mississippi River. This is the first priority reach that we're addressing in a feasibility study. This is the Hatchie-Loosahatchie reach. So we're really excited to really get kicked off into some ecosystem restoration activities. So this just shows you that priority reach. Again, it starts at river mile 775 and extends down to river mile 736. It's about a 39-mile reach bordering Tennessee and Arkansas. So historically, we mentioned navigation and flood risk management has received the most attention in the LMR. In terms of the purpose and need, we're reaching out into a new mission area, the ecosystem restoration. So the purpose and need for this proposed action are to restore the habitat and ecosystem function along this 39-mile reach of the lower Mississippi River and its floodplain without conflicting with the flood risk management and navigation missions. So this study reach extends, again, 39 miles, starting on the upstream end about where the Hatchie River comes in at river mile 775. It extends downstream to the mouth of the Wolf River Harbor around 736. And it includes essentially the active floodplains. So you've got the mainline levee bordering the west bank. You got high bluffs bordering the east bank. So it's the active floodplain. You got the lands and waters, often referred to as the Batcher, totaling about 146,000 acres. As we were going through our study and moving from kind of conceptual ideas of ecosystem restoration to moving into site-specific measures, we felt the need to break up this large study area into smaller geographic complexes to be able to focus on how the hydrology and geomorphic features relate to each other and to the habitats that are out there. So we broke it up into 11 geographic complexes. We've got the abbreviations up here. So as we developed our measures, you'll notice they have these abbreviations that track throughout the document. So starting at the top here, that you'll see that first geographic complex is designated as an S. That's the Sunrise Island complex. So if you see a measure that's listed S1, that would be the first measure in that geographic complex, and that extends throughout the study area. So this complicated diagram here, this is what's known as a conceptual ecological model. So this is straight out of that LMRRA report done in 2015, and it really highlights how interconnected all the processes and habitats are out there on the lower river. But just to summarize it real quick, that what you're seeing on the top line is what are known as drivers. What you're seeing in the middle are the stressors, and what you're seeing on the bottom are the ecological effects. So we mentioned the flood risk management component. So the mainline levees have obviously protected the alluvial valley from flooding since their inception. But with that comes some trade-offs, right? So a lot of the floodplain has been restricted. It's been documented up to 80% reduction in that floodplain habitats. When you think about the channel improvement features, that's allowed the navigation to occur on the river year-round. So we're reminded of that. This past summer, we had a historic low water year. Navigation didn't cease. They kept the navigation going even with that low water. But what that has done has restricted that channel from meandering across the alluvial valley, that in the levee system. So a lot of those habitats, those old historic oxbows, those river cutoffs, the meander scarps, a lot of those riverine habitats don't get created anymore. So restoring some of those ecosystem functions to those habitats that we still have is increasingly important. When you think of land use, so a lot of the existing forest we have out here in the floodplain, it's been historically logged. A lot of the hardmast producing species like your oaks and acorn producing species, the other hardmast that the wildlife use to feed, have been logged out. And so you see an overstory often dominated by sugarberry and hackberry, your cottonwoods, sycamore, some of the other species that aren't as valuable for wildlife. So we're looking at some opportunities there to restore some of those hard mass producing species. When you think about climate change, so we know we're getting periods of drought are increasing in intensity. So during those low water times, when these habitats do become disconnected, there's a lot of the wildlife out there is adapted to some level of low water conditions. We've got freshwater mussels that can bury in the sediment and withstand when the water drops out, but there is an extent to how long they can persist in that way, and so long before the river comes back up. And then you have point sources and other anthropogenic sources that obviously can affect localized areas as well. So this slide here, this shows you the goals and objectives we developed with our non-federal sponsor. We did this early in our process. Our overall goal is really to restore the ecological structure and function to the whole mosaic of habitats along this reach of the river. So we weren't just focusing on the aquatics. We weren't just focusing on wetlands. We're really focusing on that whole mosaic of habitats and how that is important for biodiversity for the whole lower river. In doing so, we did need to break it up into different objectives to really get those site-specific measures out there on the landscape. So our first objective deals with the vegetative mosaic. So you have some of those habitats that used to be prevalent that aren't as prevalent anymore. You've got a lot of your submerged aquatic vegetation, things like cypress tupelo swamps that used to be prevalent out there in the landscape that aren't as prevalent anymore. We talked about the bottomland hardwood communities and their shift in composition. And then you have historic vegetation like river cane, which the Native American tribes have used that in the past, and that's an important resource for them in the past, and that they're not as prevalent anymore. You do see some remnant stands in the understory of the forest that's out there, but you really don't see those cane breaks, those large stands of river cane like you used to. The second objective really focuses on those flowing river habitats. So this is those large river habitats that support those obligate riverine species. So that's those species like the federally endangered pallid sturgeon, bluesucker, several other species of conservation concern that need that flowing water in those large river habitats. The third objective focuses on those floodplain water bodies. So this is more of your backwater environment. And increasing aquatic connectivity to a lot of these floodplain water bodies was one of our focal areas. That's critically important for species like alligator gar that have been documented to be one of the only native predators that can grow large enough to combat the invasive carp that are out there on the lower river. Other species like paddlefish, alligator snapping turtle that are becoming a species of concern. This would help to address those species as well. And then our fourth objective really is a secondary type of objective for our ecosystem restoration project. So our Corps of Engineers Ecosystem Restoration Authority doesn't allow us to formulate specifically for recreation in terms of building large marinas, that large boat ramps, paved boat ramps, that sort of thing. But we did incorporate public access, public education to some of these ecosystem restoration functions where we could. So what are we proposing to do? I was going to show a few slides here of just some of the examples of the types of measures we're talking about. So we talked about some of the rare vegetative communities out there. So we're really talking about reestablishing those. So we've compiled some hydrologic data that shows what areas inundate long enough to support cypress tupelo swamps or cypress tupelo community compositions. We've looked through the hydric soils list and hydric soil mapping to find those areas. We talked about the bottomland hardwood, bringing back some of those hard mass producing species, opening up some canopy gaps in existing forest, replanting those hard mass species, and promoting that vegetative type. Seasonal herbaceous wetlands. So where we have areas of non-productive farmland that's frequently flooded, that may be conducive to wetland restoration, we're looked at that as well. Riparian buffers. So there are areas along the Mississippi River that where the Mississippi River doesn't have that large buffer or tree screen adjacent to the top bank. So it's about a 300-foot width is the recommendation to help banks stabilize the bank, as well as provide a wildlife corridor along the top bank of the Mississippi River. So we've identified some opportunities there. And then we talked about river cane, trying to get some light penetration to those existing stands, increasing the health of those river cane stands where we know they exist, and looking at helping that community as well. When we talked about that second objective, we really talked about those large secondary channels, encouraging connectivity with the main channel. One of the primary tools we have to do that is what's known as dike notching. So you can see here this secondary channel on the left-hand side of the screen that is connected. In the middle diagram there, you can see what is a closure structure that's the Corps of Engineers, they call those dikes or wing dams. So this is a historic closure dike that allowed that navigation channel to establish along the outside bend. However, those closure structures aren't needed anymore now that the channel has established itself. They're not needed to the extent that they were in the past. And our river engineers have shown that we can put a notch in the system to maintain that aquatic connectivity without affecting the navigation channel. So we have several of these proposed measures in our plan. Increasing connectivity to meander scarps. So meander scarps are just historic river channels that have been cut off in the past. There's 14 by our counts throughout the study. We did a count of how many of these meander scarps still maintain flow most of the year. So there's only 14 of these in the whole lower Mississippi River. Three of those 14 are within our study reach. So that was one of our focal areas, is really addressing connectivity in those meander scarps. So they're pretty unique in that they're pretty long. So they're usually 8 to 10 miles long, bordered. You have an island on one side, a forested island, typically a large amount of forest along both banks, and it really has a really long channel that's connected to the main river most of the year. That species like the federally endangered pallid sturgeon, your federally endangered fat pocketbook mussel can persist in those environments. So lowering the invert elevation of any obstructions in those, notching the old pile dikes where they exist in those meander scarps, where you have bridges that go across there, lowering the invert elevation of those bridges to really open up and increase that connectivity is one of our goals in those habitats. So when we talk about that third objective, restoring some of those floodplain water bodies. So one of the ways we can do that is to lower culvert elevations to increase connectivity, but it's also to deepen those areas. So most of these floodplain water bodies have filled in over time. So since the river has been disconnected from those areas, a lot of the floodplain water bodies that exist out there are associated with the advent of the levee system. So you have the bar areas, which were dug out to construct the levee. Those were dug to about 8 to 10 feet. And the majority of these have filled in all the way up to about 3 foot in depth on average. So looking at restoring some of that depth and creating some habitat complexity in those floodplain water bodies would provide some aquatic benefit. This shows you one of those bar areas that we've sampled in the past, and you can see us standing there right in the middle of it, just to give you a visual of how shallow that those are. Digging out those pits deeper, getting some deeper holes in there, creating some island habitat, making sure there's a good forested buffer around it would all benefit those floodplain water bodies. And we mentioned increasing connectivity to them as well. So a lot of times these floodplain water bodies are connected through a small flow path to the river, and there are different types of obstructions there. So there may be a sediment plug, there may be a culvert that's undersized, or there may be a culvert set at an elevation that's too high. So lowering those invert elevations of those culverts, putting in a water control structure if it's needed, removing the plugs. That's the type of connectivity measures that we've looked at. And it's not just getting water to those floodplain water bodies. A lot of times there's fields adjacent to those that are low elevation fields. So that's what this chart on the bottom shows, is the average elevation of the field adjacent to this water body. It becomes inundated. This is an average water year about in 2017. You can see inundation is about 30 days on that field. And that's important for several floodplain spawning species, but in particular the alligator gar. They're fairly unique in that they need non-forested, low elevation fields like that become inundated in the spring, and then a pretty long duration flood that allows the water to get out on that field, the temperature to increase enough for them to spawn and have a successful reproduction. And the reason, again, that these species are important, they were one of our native predators. They've been documented in the Lower Mississippi River Basin Invasive Carp Control Strategy Framework as a natural predator for those invasive carp, and promoting the health of them has been an increasingly important goal. So the next few slides, I'm really going to try to step you through our plan formulation strategy and how we started in our study area, moving from kind of a blank canvas to a tentatively selected plan. So using our interagency team, that non-federal sponsor, all of our stakeholders, we got together early in the process. We had some interagency planning charrettes where we sat down. They provided lots of really valuable information, lots of data layers. We talked about the hydric soils, different biologic and physical data layers that we were able to compile and start developing what our goals, objectives were, start looking at what the opportunities out there in the landscape, and start laying things out. We started out with 31 study area-wide restoration strategies, so things like dike notching. We even looked at working up in the tributaries, so there was head cutting issues that we addressed in some of those tributaries. However, as we were going through that process, we realized the scope of some of those problems were a little outside of what we were able to accomplish in this 3-year study. So we screened those down to 26 restoration strategies. So that working in addressing the head cutting in those tributaries is an example of one of those that we screened out, just being outside of the scope of what we could accomplish with this study. So one of our tools we used to help move from those conceptual ideas to placing measures out there, opportunities on the landscape, was ArcGIS Online. So our sponsors were really valuable partners in compiling a lot of this data that's been out there. So the LMRCC, they mentioned the Restoring America's Greatest River projects. So they have some priority areas already identified. Lower Mississippi Valley Joint Venture, they have their forest breeding bird priority areas. We were able to overlay that on there. NRCS, of course, has the hydric soils data. U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, they have a habitat suitability index that shows those areas that are valuable for alligator gar spawning and provide the right conditions for them. So we were able to use that. And then we had a lot of hydrologic information out there to overlay on top of that, as well as elevation data to help work our way through our plan formulation. So we spent about a year from those initial planning charrettes, really getting those site-specific measures identified and placed out there on the landscape. We ended up with 207 site-specific measures, and that was a lot. So what do you do from there? So what we ended up doing is running those through some various ecological models that we developed for the study, and looking at which ones performed well and screening those down to 85. We also had some public scoping meetings where we presented these to the public. And we showed how we screened them down from those 207 to 85. We opened it up for public comment to get feedback on those site-specific measures. And these are all addressed. They're included in Appendix 1 of the main report. So if you're interested in things that were included or screened out, they're all addressed in that appendix. So the ecological models, we've got some colleagues at the Engineer Research and Development Center from the Corps of Engineers that have been researching the river for decades, And they've been a valuable tool for us to use. They were an active part of the plan formulation process, and they developed some ecological models that we could use using their database over the past 30 years or more out there in the lower Mississippi River. So these models are all a little different, measuring different types of habitats, but the basic format of them is the same, where you have a suitability index between 0 and 1, 1 being a really healthy environment, 0 being not so healthy. And then you have an area that you multiply that by. So typically that's acres. You multiply that suitability index times that acreage, and that gives you what we call a habitat unit. So we get those habitat units, and we project that over our project life. So our period analysis for most of our Corps of Engineers studies is 50 years. So that's what we did, was predict those outputs over the project life, 50 years. We annualize that to get what's known as an average annual habitat unit, or an AAHU. And those are the units we use to compare these different measures to each other. But it's not just about the modeling outputs. It's also about the significance of those outputs, right? So our partners were extremely valuable to us, able to work through how significant these outputs are. What is important for the species of conservation concern? The terms you see on the slide here: institutional recognition, public recognition, and technical recognition. This is the way the Corps of Engineers recognizes significance in their ecosystem restoration study. One of our main tools was the state wildlife action plans. So each state has a list of species of conservation concern in their state, and our partners were able to get that list, sort through it, see which ones are prevalent in the habitats in our study reach, and how our measures affect those. So using that information, we used those 85 site-specific measures retained, and then we plug those into some of our economic models. Particularly, it's called the cost effectiveness incremental cost analysis. So what that does is it looks at your habitat units, your ecological outputs, and it looks at the cost, and it starts combining those into different combinations to really find where you get the biggest bang for your buck. So it's all about comparing these to each other and coming out with those best buy plans, or those most efficient plans. So ultimately, we looked at that cost effectiveness incremental cost analysis came out with 27 different measure combinations, and we included 10 of these in our final array. So that's what this slide here shows. These 10 alternatives. The first alternative really is it's the no action alternative. So that's the future without project condition that you compare all your action alternatives to. We also had two alternatives that the study team developed. The first one really focused on those ones that the study team felt maximized habitat diversity across all of our objectives and ecological models. So we used didn't pay attention to cost as much for that first alternative. We wanted to focus on which ones did the study team feel were best meeting those objectives there. Alternative B was another study team developed one, and that's one we wanted to look at that really focused on what if we just did stuff on existing public lands and those publicly accessible open water. So that was a total of 23 ecological measures is where those were cited, and we compared those to our alternatives as well. So alternative C, it was really a series of 7 sub-alternatives, C1 through C7. So that's where we use that cost effectiveness incremental cost analysis, or CEICA software, where it looked at hundreds of iterations, combinations of these measures, and came out with those ones that were the best buy plans, or the most cost-effective plans. I want to highlight C3 and C4. So C4 was an alternative that had the most number of measures. It had 55 ecological measures. So not coincidentally, it provided the most ecological outputs across the largest acreage. However, C3 is our tentatively selected plan. So that's one that included some sensitive habitats. It included 2 out of the 3 of those meander scarps, and it provided a lot of other valuable habitat. And we couldn't justify making that jump from C3 to C4. The amount of cost it took to jump to that next alternative just wasn't justified. So what is in that tentatively selected plan, alternative C3? So it's a total of 38 ecological measures. We got some maps in the back of the room. They're also included in the appendix in the main report. It also includes 2 recreational measures. So looking at a demo project in the Wolf River Harbor, where we could put one of these large woody debris traps we've talked about to provide fish structure in some of these secondary channels, as well as some public education component with that. And then some trails up in the Meeman Forest area next to one of our ecological measures are those 2 recreational measures. The ecological measures provide restoration to over 6,000 acres of habitat. It includes 2 of those flowing meander scarps we talked about, those rare geomorphological features that aren't no longer created. It prefers those, those meander scarps, those preferred habitat for threatened and endangered species like those young of the year pallid sturgeon, the young pallid sturgeon that get out of the main channel flow and get in those flowing secondary channels to feed. You got your fat pocketbook mussel that is able to persist. It doesn't have the erosive flows and shifting sand substrates that you have in the main channel. So those flowing meander scarps are a prime habitat for that endangered species. It also has technically significant habitat for alligator gar and Cypress tupelo, 2 rare habitat types we talked about. In addition, it provided some other social effects benefits. So when we looked at the climate and economic justice screening tool that was recently developed, nearly all, over 95% of our benefit areas are within the CEJST communities. So this slide here just shows you a map of those, of what that tentatively selective plan is. Again, these are in Appendix 1. All the measures that are included in here, you can see their abbreviations. Every red dot on these maps has a measure associated with it. And you can find those in Appendix 1 in a pretty detailed description. Other things that are in the main report. So this is a list of the significant resources. So when we look at how the tentatively selective plan, how those measures, what is their effects out on the landscape. So these are significant resources we address. So things like land use, wetlands, wildlife, aquatic resources, those special status species, et cetera, all the way through this list here. There's a subsection in the report that addresses each one of these resources. So that concludes the study overview. We're going to open it up for comments for the remaining of the meeting. So in terms of submitting comments, again, you can send an email to this website you see here. You can do that now during the commenting portion, and we can read them tonight. If you want to think about it and provide those at a later date, the comment period is open till March 13th, so we encourage you to do that. Written comments can also be submitted through mail on the address you've seen here. And then the chat function. So the chat function is open as well on the YouTube. So if you'd like to, if you're on the virtual portion of the meeting and you'd like to submit a comment, you can do so through that function. Again, we just encourage you to provide your name and email so we have some contact information in case we need to follow up. The mics are open for those of you in the room. If anyone would like to stand up and speak, that's open for you to do now as well. So it's about 7:35 right now. We're going to open this comment period up until 8 o'clock tonight. And then again, if we don't get to it tonight, then the comment closing date is March 13th. So we just encourage your participation there. You can also see our project website here. We'll leave this slide up. This is where the main communicative tool we have. This is where we're posting the main document. This is where we're posting our notifications. This is where we're posting most of the study related information, and encourage you to check out that website. I'll open it up for public comments now. Thanks.
Mike, if we can, I'd like for Angie Rogers to come and read a comment from the Nature Conservancy, one of our major partners in this project.
Thanks. Okay. Thank you. This comment is being submitted by the Nature Conservancy, so I'm just going to read it on their behalf. The Nature Conservancy is an international conservation organization that works throughout the United States in 80 countries around the world. The Nature Conservancy has been a partner to the Lower Mississippi River Conservation Committee's mission of restoration on the Lower Mississippi since the early 2000s. We are pleased that the Hatchie-Loosahatchie feasibility study has provided a tentatively selected plan that, when implemented, will restore rare meander scarps and other off-channel habitats critical for the life history of many aquatic species that reside or are migratory to this portion of the Mississippi River. Alligator gar, pallid sturgeon, fat pocketbook mussels, interior least terns, many species of special concern, shorebirds, and waterfowl will all benefit when these restoration actions are in place. Additionally, one measure is slated to provide another access site to the river for people to enjoy firsthand the benefits of a restored section. This tentatively selected plan maximizes the national economic benefit and will deliver important regional economic and environmental justice value. The Nature Conservancy will also provide written comments in support of the tentatively selected plan to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers as an official partner in this process. Thank you.
Thank you, Angie, and thank you, Nature Conservancy. So they've been a critical stakeholder throughout this plan formulation process. They really helped us work through those state wildlife action plans, documenting significance of a lot of our activities out there. Yeah, we'll just continue to monitor our email box in the chat function and encourage you, again, if you would like to submit comments, you can do so. Just provide your name and email and organization if you're associated with one.